Honestly, I feel a bit like a video game. I keep restarting because I make a mistake and now I have to restart. Anyway, thank you, Wendy, for this future introduction. And of course, thank you, Ninon and Laura, for inviting me to present. And yeah, if I seem a bit in pain, that is because I am in pain. I have a bit of a sprain in my back, and not a bit, quite a big one. And that's very much on my mind. Also, yeah, I usually use a transcript, but in this case, I decided to try and use a PowerPoint. If something isn't clear, if one of the images aren't very clear, please let me know, and I will write you an email or talk to you, whatever you prefer. Tirosh at hi.is. So, just a quick positioning. We are in Iceland in the Middle Ages. There's Vikings, there's ghosts, there's cows, turf houses, glaciers, harsh environment, but better than it is now, I guess. Yeah, if you want to hear more about Iceland, but the idea is just to position us. These sagas take place in kind of the high Middle Ages between 870 and 1030, but they're written down between the 13th century and the 15th century. So let's talk a bit about Crip Time. What is Crip Time? So Crip Time is an offshoot of Queer Time. Queer Time is the idea that if you are queer, then time works a bit different for you. In some cases, of course, not in all cases. A lot of it stemmed from HIV, the fact that you have this kind of temporality in your life. Then there was introduced the idea of sex workers, the fact that they operate in different hours of the day. But of course, the heteronormative birth, marriage, children, death is what is being addressed. Is what is being actually resisted to. Then from that, people noticed, hey, or rather Alison Kafer and others noticed, hey, a disabled life also offers a similar disruption. In some cases, there's a shorter life. In some cases, there's time dedicated for medical care. In other cases, time dedicated to chronic pain. I stress the chronic because, time, chronic. Of course, also, there's a self-care method of pacing, which Emma Sheppard discusses, and it's quite interesting. I recommend reading their material. So, yeah, I do want to point out that a lot of the work that I'm presenting stemmed from a lot of cooperation with Christopher Crocker. In this case, I tried to kind of like put in a box what I associate with his thoughts, so there's no clash. But yeah, hopefully he will publish his own take on Crip Time. But I think that my idea of Crip Time and how I apply it is somewhat distinct, but I do want to convey what he says because it's really smart stuff. Okay, so chronic pain disrupts the vengeance schedule. Iceland is a very masculinity-obsessed society. And if you have chronic pain, for example, that does not allow you to engage in vengeance in the schedule that other people might want. Then, of course, it's interpreted as unmasculine. So Crip Time equals queer time. Heteronormative and homosocial interactions can be disrupted by disease, disability, and chronic pain. So basically, the very harsh heteronormative society of Iceland, with its hegemonic masculinity, as Gareth Evans, the term he uses. Yeah, so it's very hard to incorporate yourselves into that if you are disabled. But that being said, it has been done. So yes, I do recommend Christopher Crocker has this great bibliography for anything saga and disability related. You can check out his website. Just Google Christopher Crocker sagas, and you'll probably find his website. But anyway, here's the address, and I can of course email it to whoever is interested. Now I want to introduce my first scene that I will be discussing. It's Ljósvetninga saga. I'm not going to go too much into the details. This is my favorite saga. Ljósvetninga saga C redaction. I should note People say it was written in the 13th century. We only have manuscripts from the 15th, late 14th, 15th century of this saga. So, take it with a spinach of salt. Anyway, in this scene specifically, there is a man who is on board of a ship, and suddenly a person comes to him and says to him, hey, there's this Þorgerðr the leper here, and we want you to take him with you to Norway. They're headed to Norway on an exile. And he says, no, I'll find accommodations for him. And then he goes somewhere and comes back without him. They set sail and there's no wind. Why is it so calm? So they draw lots. And if this reminds you of the book of Jonah, that is because, well, there's probably an influence. Lauren Poyer wrote about this or is writing about this in her PhD. I forget if she submitted, but she's close to it. Anyway, so they draw lots, they figure out that, hey, Maur's to blame, this guy's to blame, what happened? And they said, oh yeah, I kind of killed my leper kinsman. Oh no, not nice. Someone to kill him. And then they decide, okay, let's just, he can do some charity and stuff. But the idea is, Maur does not want to take, I'm just looking at my time, I'm not checking Facebook or something. Maur decides to resist Crip Time by killing his, his disabled, again, disability and leprosy is, of course, not always one-to-one, but for the purposes of this argument, let's go with it. The saga does describe him as someone who is not able to provide for themselves. So that is why I categorize him as disabled in this instance. Yes, so this is very awkward, a silence. Okay, yes, it's very weird because this is recorded and still I have these moments. Okay, so Maur resists Crip Time, and this kind of shows to us that Crip Time is always met with giving care to people with disability or disabled people, introduces a kind of tension between straight time and Crip Time. And this is something that we'll encounter in my other examples. So, yes, this is another saga. It's called Bjarna's saga Hittdeila Kappa, if I'm pronouncing this correctly. A Jude, an unpleasant Jude called Þorgerðr, kills the lover of Oddný, his wife. So Þorgerðr is married to Oddný, and her lover Björn is killed by Þorgerðr. When Þorgerðr tells his wife Oddný, she suddenly just collapses and she becomes sick, and she seems to be waning health, mikil vanheilsa. Basically, she's just very weak and she can't do much. And the only thing that kind of comforts her is when Þorgerðr takes her on a joyride, I guess, on a horse, and this is kind of a thing that soothes her. In this case, I think that the act of caregiving, so let's say embracing Crip Time, also involves in it embracing queer time, because this is a very odd situation. The man has to comfort his wife for the death of her lover, who he killed, but he killed among other reasons because of this jealousy. So basically he's accepting her love to someone else, but because he loves her, he's kind of like into this non-traditional love relationship. And basically there's kind of like an interlocking of Crip Time and of queer time. Another case, which I have to speak for 15 minutes. This is very stressful for me. So yeah, it's probably why I seem even more stressed despite the pain, but whatever. Vápnfirðinga, all these side notes take more time. Vápnfirðinga saga, we have a woman called Halla, and she's married to a chap called Brodd-Helgi. Let's call him Helgi for the purposes of. And she tells him that she is feeling ill, she is not feeling well, and that she will not be able to manage their household for long. He does overtures of love. Oh, I'll love you, baby. I love you so much. But after a few months or so, he basically marries someone else, a woman called Silfra. I mean, her nickname is Silfra, which means silver, which I think is quite interesting. In one case, he goes to visit his ex-wife, and she asks him to take out some pus from her wound, and he does that, and she's in pain, but it kind of soothes her. But then she asks him to stay the night. He doesn't, and she dies. Not pleasant. And indeed, Helgi refuses to join his wife or ex-wife Halla in Crip Time because basically if he were to stay with her, that would basically, being kind of with your ex-wife when you're already married. So that's kind of an odd situation, right? It's a non-traditional queer time. Sorry, yes, but it's also Crip time. And this, you see, I conflate these two because they're so intermingled in my mind. But Crip time, of course, just to be there to be her caregiver. So that is also part of that. What is interesting is that he replaces his wife Halla, who becomes chronically ill, or basically is dying. He replaces her with a young, healthy widow. So the widow, because she's widowed, she's presumably, independent, very rich. Basically, he takes her from queer time and puts his wife in queer time, puts her as a divorcee, as someone who's, ignored by her husband. And all of this is because of a negotiation with Crip Time. So I just really like how all of this is, it's so wonky, I guess the word is. And I also really like that the widow's name is Þorgerðr silver, and it's kind of like some proto-capitalism things, treating people as commodities. The word commodity I know is not the accurate, but I'm not very versed in Marxist theory. I'm sorry about that, and you feel welcome to correct me. Yeah, okay, so I think I'm doing well with time. So not everything sucks, it turns out. I want to finish off with something. It's not really about old women or old men per se, but it is about giving care. And it was very important for me to kind of finish on a nice note. So I'm not going to go into the whole story, but there's a story called Hreiðarstautur, the story of Hreiðar. In some versions, he's referred to as Hreiðar the Heimskur, which could be understood as intellectually disabled. But there is something very unclear. In many ways, I think he more fits the category of a fool in the court fool sense, not fool as an intellectual disability. But it doesn't really matter. The point is that he arrives in court. He's brought to court by his brother, who doesn't want to take him there. But then eventually he becomes a better person by interacting with the king, the Norwegian king. And yeah, that's kind of like, that's very interesting. But what's really interesting about this story is the moment where Hreiðar basically confronts his brother and asks him to take him to Norway with him. And he says that if you don't take me, you will basically have to eventually either avenge me or get into a dispute that I will start because I'm just so bad at managing my money. So Þorgerðr basically still needs to deal with Crip Time. He either needs to deal with Crip Time directly, which is to take his brother with him, or he needs to deal with Crip Time in a more, a delayed way, right? There's an alarm outside. I hope it's fine. It's alarming. He decides to be the good brother, and he takes his brother with him. He's not very nice to him. You can't say this is an ideal sibling relationship, but he's better than that guy that killed his family member that had leprosy. Yeah, okay, so I want to just finish off with some conclusions. The point is that access, okay, yes. Reluctance to take the part of caregiver could be understood as a reluctance to accept Crip Time. So it's just really important for me to stress how intertwined these two categories are. Crip Time is often entangled with queer time, creating a network. This is just because of all the titles with entangled and network. Basically, yeah, I think that my point has been clear. Hopefully, this recording will only be put on YouTube or something, and you will never see it. But if you did, thank you very much for your time. Please follow Real Mundiriki or Viking Comics by Yoav on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If everything goes all right and I don't catch some disease, then I will be there to answer your questions, even if this recording is played. But if this recording is played, it probably means that I am unwell. So thank you very much, and hope to see you in person, or at least digitally. Cool. Now I have to stop this recording.